Welcome to Our First Century, the podcast that celebrates 100 years of TA Loving Company's legacy in the construction industry. We are your hosts, Ty and Krista. In this special episode, we're diving deep into the heart of TA Loving Company's journey. In today's episode, Building a Legacy, we're joined by a very special guest. Sam Hunter has been an integral part of TA Loving Company's story since 1971.
Sam's 54-year journey in the construction industry is a testament to the values and vision that have driven TA Loving Company forward for 100 years. From the early days to where we are now, Sam's unique perspective offers a glimpse into the past, present, and future. Sam, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Krista and Ty. I look forward to our conversation.
We do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive in to Building a Legacy with Sam Hunter.
Sam, what inspired you to pursue a career in construction?
Ty, I was born in Virginia in 1944 in March in a very rural area of the mountains. My worldview at that point in time really didn't give me any idea what I would want to do. To give you a little idea of how I grew up, we had a telephone, and not everybody had a telephone, but it was a wooden box on the wall. It had a little crank on the side and a mouthpiece with another part that you pulled off to listen. And that was on a party line to a switchboard a mile away, and the lady could listen to your calls. Our phone number was 30F3. Our phone number was 3 rings of the phone. So that's how we knew it was ours and not somebody else. So that's just one thing that was going on back then. When my friends and I talked about numbers, and I was pretty good in math, we could count to thousands and we could count to millions. But you know what we said after millions? We said gazillions. There wasn't any such thing as billions and trillions like we have now. And success in my little neighborhood was there was a DuPont plant 12 miles away. And my friends whose fathers worked there, they were very successful because I think they were making $2 an hour. And for overtime, they got $3, which was everything. And for working on weekends, they would get $4. So that was success. What I value, though, from working on the farm was the lessons I learned about hard work and the value of hard work. And so by the time I was 16 and I was ready to go to college, I told my mother that I think I didn't want to be a farmer. So that eliminated one thing for me in my career. And I was accepted at Virginia Tech to go into civil engineering. And during the summers while I was in civil engineering, I worked one summer for a contractor. And even with a year of engineering education behind me, they handed me a chainsaw and I cleared right away and stacked up the stuff that I cut, and we burned it right there. Now, that's a cheap way to clear right away, but that's what I did. The next summer, I had another little introduction to construction by working for the Virginia Department of Transportation, taking off quantities for construction plans, and I made $1.75 an hour, which I remember, and that was really good pay back then. But anyway, I graduated from college in 1965 with an engineering degree, and in 1965, the railroads in the United States were a very critical industry, and they were recruiting civil engineers, and they actually were paying the highest of any company that was recruiting civil engineers. And not that I really wanted to work for the railroads, but $620 a month seemed like quite a good salary. So I went for work for the railroads and worked for a year, and I worked outside, and I liked working outside from my farm days, and worked with people and men and some ladies, but that was enjoyable work. But after a year, and during that time, I did get married, and so the railroads were seven days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And in '66, the Vietnam War became so focused, the U.S. became so focused on the Vietnam War, I became subject to a draft. So I took a leave from the railroads, although I'll tell you, I had decided then that the railroads weren't going to be for me. So I had eliminated a couple things as to what I wanted to do. Well, I went into, while I was in graduate school, I got accepted to the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, which they are in charge of all the Navy facilities on land over the whole world. And I've spent 2 years in the Navy in Norfolk, Virginia, doing public works. And then I went to Vietnam for a year with the Navy Seabees, where we did construction in a combat zone and also did maintenance of facilities in a combat zone. I got out of, the service wanted me to stay in, but I was in Vietnam and you couldn't talk to anybody on phone. There was no phone service, although you could through a ham operator, but that wasn't really too good, saying over to some guy that switched you over. So Ann and I decided we better not stay in the service. They wanted me badly, but I decided to get out. When I came home from Vietnam, I interviewed actually with a couple cities for public works type work. But Ann, my wife, was the daughter of John Loving, who was T.A. Loving's brother, and John had gone to work for him in 26. And so I knew about T.A. Loving, obviously, and they knew about me. So they came and recruited me in 1971, and so that was the start of my construction career.
That's an interesting start.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, because Ann is a legacy of T.A. Loving Company, if you could tell us a little bit about how you and Ann met.
That's really interesting, too. We're from the same county, but we lived 8 miles apart, and our parents may have known each other. But it's interesting. I was born March the 5th, 1944. Ann was born March the 26th, 1944, in the same hospital. So back then, I doubt my mother had hardly gotten out of the hospital before Ann's mother came in. But anyway, we did not meet. Ann and I met, actually, though, when we were 13 years old, when we started high school. And by the time we were 14-year-olds, we were pretty much sweethearts. And that was on and off till she went to school in South Carolina at Converse College, and I went to school at Virginia Tech, and I made a lot of trips down there. And of course, we had some time that we weren't together, but we got married then. I graduated in 65. We did not have 12 grades in high school. I went to college after 11. She took another year at a private school. So when she finished in April of 66, that's when we got married. And we've been married now for 68 years, I guess it is. 58 years, sorry.
Congratulations. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, I love the story you told about how you made it to the construction industry, because I think all of us that are in the industry, we've all got a story that led us to an industry that's just full of opportunity. And I think that's what I always think about. And that's what I think about with T.A. Loving Company, the opportunity that we provide to so many people. And your story explaining that, I think, really does a good job of exemplifying that.
Well, thank you, Ty.
So, Sam, you've seen a lot over the last 54 years in the construction industry. Tell us about how things have evolved over your 54 years and anything else over the past 100 years that you're aware of.
Christa, I believe that the construction industry probably has not changed or evolved as much as maybe other industries have. We still are very much a people person industry. We are dependent upon people. Our projects, all of our projects are different. They're at different locations. We have different safety requirements. We have evolved, though, because of technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I talked to you about my beginning and my small worldview, there was no way I could understand what all has happened since that time. And from that crank phone on the wall, cell phones and what technology, what communications, what weather forecasting, what computers have done for the construction industry is really the evolution that I've seen that has impacted it the most.
So, Sam, can you take us back to August 13th, 1971, which was your first day at TA Loving Company, and tell us a little bit about the technology that you used, the project you were working on, what was happening on that day in 1971?
Krista, I was sort of in a transition stage. I was actually living with my wife's family, with John Loving and the family in Virginia. And T.A. Loving was finishing up a job near Fork Union, Virginia, which is over the mountain past Charlottesville. So I was able to report my first day of work to a job that that T.A. Loving was trying to finish. It was a bridge in Columbia, Virginia, that the hurricane back in 1969 had washed out, and T.A. Loving put it back. There wasn't much left to do, but I showed up, and I was the only gold hat on the job. That's why. And so I was really kind of green. I had a gold hat instead of a daggone fatigues on. That was one thing, because I'd been back from Vietnam less than 3 months. But basically, we were just actually cleaning up the job, and I had no communication back to Goldsboro. Mm. That's really, technology-wise, that was the main difference. And we had a crane there, and that's one of the things that equipment has changed over the years too. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in our presentation here. So, but that day I can remember just because it was the first day of work, but there wasn't anything outstanding happened other than I made it through it.
Well, that is something to celebrate, right?
I'm still here.
But changing jobs is one of the top 3 most stressful experiences a person can have, right? So I think the fact that you made it through is what really counts in this conversation.
Yeah. It was, obviously was a good start because I'm still here, and age is the only thing that's got me to the point that I think I need to retire. So I'm looking forward to those days also, although I don't know what I'll do.
I believe you will fill that time very well.
Okay.
So you said there was no communication with Goldsboro back at that time in 1971. So was the only communication prior to the start of a job, or were there other scheduled meetings throughout the progress of the job? How did that work?
Well, now I just started work, so I didn't know. I say there's no communication. Well, I had to go somewhere to where there was a telephone. This job didn't have a job trailer. If they had one, and I doubt they ever even really had much of a job trailer, but there was no phone there. But you had to communicate however you communicated by phone. The chain of command was obviously through the general superintendent, or a guy named Giles Trimble, and he had given me instructions on what I was supposed to do. And I only stayed at that job for a week, and the job was finished, and then I moved to Goldsboro. So that was just a temporary assignment, but it was the first day of my work at T.A. Loving. And I had forgotten the date, actually. So I cannot deny it was the 13th.
That's what the documents say, so that is what we're sticking with. Sam, you told us about your first day and how you started at T.A. Loving Company. Tell us a little bit more about your experience over the years.
Yes, Krista, we moved, as I mentioned, we moved to Goldsboro after I finished that job up in Virginia. And the first project that I was assigned to here in Goldsboro was being a superintendent on building a bridge over the Tar River in Greenville, North Carolina. It's an extension of the Greenville Boulevard, which is the main road going around Greenville. That was in 1971. One of the real experiences that I had that I've remembered and meant so much to me as a young superintendent was we were a subcontractor for Barnhill Construction, which is a partner of ours now. But Mr. Barnhill, who had started that job, we were a subcontractor to them, and he would come visit the job, and he'd drive his Continental down the right-of-way and come over and talk to me. Well, now, as a 27-year-old guy new in the business, it really did mean a lot to me. But anyway, I did that job, and it went well. But what was also good about that job, I didn't know anything about building bridges. And as we do at TA Loving, a lot of hard hats that are gold are in there actually doing the work. And so it gave me an opportunity as superintendent that I learned hands-on, not only to lead the crew, but to be a part of the crew. So that was very important on that first job. After that job, I transitioned and spent some of my time with our utility division, and we were building sewer pump stations, and it introduced me to the sewer and water business, which we would get into later on, or I would get into. During the late 70s, it also gave me an opportunity. I had become a professional engineer, and it gave me a little bit of an opportunity to use my engineering license in designing false work to support concrete. And OSHA was just created by the federal government, and they required trench boxes to be engineered, so I did some of those. And so I actually had and we were doing a big bridge in Norfolk, Virginia, and I was involved in doing some of the surveying to lay out that bridge during construction. So that actually the only time I've used my engineering degree was basically during those times. But the knowledge is basic, and as Ty knows, it gives us a baseline to work off of. Well, in 1978, I was promoted to head of the utility division, and at that point in time, I was away from the actual work being done. And that's a big step in being a manager, is when you go from being right directly with the people doing the work. And it's something you have to get used to. But it allowed me to see and be with the other people that when you get to a higher level that you have to rely on, and the skills that they have, just like the skills of the people working in the field that make our industry so unique and so successful. So that went on, and the utility work was going well, and then certain changes were made in the company. And so in 1988, I was promoted to president of TA Loving Company. And since then, I've had one guiding principle, and it's really based off of one of our core values, and that's integrity. And my feeling is if you have integrity, you create trust. And when you create trust, you create relationships. And I talk to our employees all the time about the value of the relationships we have, and we need to build relationships, new ones, and build on what we have. And then that will automatically make sure that we have a wonderful reputation, because that's the one thing that I am all about at TA Loving Company. And that, along with the financial stability that we've had here, as Ty has said, it makes it a wonderful place for people to have a career. And that's one of the things that has kept me to be around the people, and that we're able to provide a place that is financially stable.
You hit on a lot of really important topics there. And one that we talk about a lot is the value of our employees understanding how the work is put in place in the field prior to moving into a position where they're managing the work. Can you talk a little bit about how important that was for you?
As I mentioned, I really, although I'd had pretty good experience with the railroad and being in the service, I had not been directly involved in construction to this point. And the best way for me as an individual to learn things is to do it myself. And I think that's the main thing. It's just like when I talked about being on the farm. The value of that farm life was learning the value of work and hard work. So I believe it's hard for me to believe people can do so much in our industry without having a good knowledge of what we're trying to get built.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point because you said it earlier. We count on a lot of people to show up on a job site. And the thing about the construction business is people have to show up and do things on a job site. And there's a way to learn that, and you've got to get out there and do it. And I think your story really is explaining that, and I think it's just a great example of what this industry is and how it works and the hard work that's required, but how rewarding it is too.
And Ty, that's what makes me feel so good about the intern program that y'all have implemented in the company. Our interns are out doing some hard work that they may not have thought they were going to be doing, but that is invaluable for them in the future if they stay with us or if they stay in construction.
Yes, I agree. The other point I wanted to go back to is when you mentioned Mr. Barnhill and a relationship being built at that time and how long those relationships are in place. I mean, that was when you essentially were starting, and that relationship with Barnhill has continued on.
It is, and I'm sure I'll bring that up a little bit later in our conversation too. It's the basis for a lot of our relationships that we have.
Yep.
One of the other points you made too was we are a people business. That is something we also talk about all of the time. It's all of the people who are doing the work. It's the relationships that we have. It's supporting the communities where we live and work. And so it really is all about people. I think sometimes construction is referred to as the final frontier. And if the final frontier is associated with the focus on people and relationships, I'm really happy that that's where we are.
Well, I was going to make that point also. I talk about our reputation. Well, our company, TA Loving Company, the brand is recognized, but we're known by our people. And, you know, that's something that each individual needs to realize.
Agreed. That is everybody's job. And you know, it's good to remind everyone in this company because they're all critical to our success. But all of the people that we have in the field working, they're the ones that are continuing and building on our reputation because they're the ones that interact with all the owners we deal with, the different vendors that we count on. Those are the ones that are in place that we've got to have in place to really make us continue to be successful.
How has the construction industry evolved over the past 100 years?
Well, I believe the evolution, as I talked a little bit about, has mainly been driven by technology. It's really been driven by and communications. As I mentioned, the communications of telephones. When I came here at TA Loving, we had landlines. And then it evolved into we had radio. We had a radio tower here in Goldsboro and a radio tower in Raleigh. And that was good for our trucks and our crews if you were within 30 miles of Goldsboro. Well, then something that you probably don't even realize evolved. The next evolution was they had something called a bag phone. And that was a combination of a radio and a telephone. So we went through that until we got to telephones. Well, that's just one of the ways. But just think in construction with all the questions and everything that we have and the need for communication, what that was. Computers. When I came to the company, we had an NCR mainframe. well, you don't even know what NCR is anymore. That's a National Cash Register Company, I think. But that was our mainframe, which in 1971, I'm not sure all companies even had mainframe computers. When I was in college, this is one thing I didn't mention, the evolution, talking about computers, my computer was a slide rule. That's how we did our calculations while I was in college up until 1965. I actually took my engineering training exam with a slide rule. But when I came here, we didn't even have a handheld calculator. They hadn't made them yet. And then when they did come out in the late 70s, they were not worth much more than addition and multiplication and division. And if you got one that had trig functions on it, it weighed about 4 pounds, and it was 10 inches long, about 4 inches wide, and 3 inches deep. And we had one of those. And that was efficient when you didn't have to look at a book and come up with trig functions to 8 digits. So that was a great evolution. The what else? Equipment. Back when I came, everything was our equipment was either steam driven or air driven, and then it drove something was cables. There was no hydraulics much when I came. There were some hydraulic machines, but the problem was they hadn't developed high pressure hoses and couplings, and so the hydraulic equipment was very basic. But now you think of the evolution because of hydraulic. You don't go by a building anymore that has scaffolding all around it. Everybody's working out of an individual basket or bucket somewhere. It's an incredibly efficient way of doing it now that we have hydraulics. Trying to think, there are a couple other things that just have evolved so much in construction as far as all the software. This is really a big deal. Of course, that's with the evolution of the computers. But when I came, we actually had a little cost reporting system, but it was very basic, and you didn't get any results except maybe weekly you would get a little bit of labor, but it was monthly. Now, all of our cost reports is basically real time. Because of cell phones or whatever, our people on the jobs, either using an iPad or a cell phone, they have instant access to real-time numbers. Those I see, concrete pouring. When we started, every bit of concrete that the company would put in place was either moved to the place you're going to put it by a Georgia buggy or a wheelbarrow, or a bucket that was hoisted by a crane. Now you call a concrete pump, and it comes right, and it's put right where you want it. And the people required are so many less people are provided. In fact, I don't even know how we'd ever get anything done. You can pour it so much quicker. But these are just a few of the examples of what technology and the evolution that I've seen in the industry. I already touched a little bit on the people are still really required, but the people's jobs in a lot of cases are more focused. So another thing that has evolved in the industry with time is weather forecasting. When I was on that job in Greenville, I would go to Greenville, and essentially I'd drive up there and turn around and drive back because we got rained out, or we decided that it was something. The weather, we didn't know that in 2 hours the weather was going to be fine, so we wasted a whole day. Now you know weather 2 weeks ahead, and you know it hour to hour, so we are so much more efficient in doing our operations because of weather. So that's just another item that has changed our industry tremendously for the good.
Sam, let's talk a little bit about safety and the evolution of safety. I know that TA Loving Company had a safety manual prior to the existence of OSHA. So can you give us a little look back into how safety has evolved over the years?
Be glad to, Krista. Actually, when I came to work for TA Loving in 1971, we had a full-time safety person. And as you said, we had a safety manual. What I see has evolved with the oncoming of OSHA is there are a lot of regulations that definitely told us things that we probably knew we were doing that weren't safe, but they pointed them out and said it was wrong to do these things. Now, obviously, we were always trying to be safe, and I would say we've always tried to be safe. But Krista, the thing that has changed, and it keeps evolving, is the safety culture. When I came with the company, we were whole lot more of a macho man type deal, and we won't get hurt in this thing. And now I know our employees realize that not only do they have to be safe, but you have to be safe for your fellow employees. You have to look out for your fellow employees. And the culture is now you don't have to. I don't think you have to have someone there all the time looking over your shoulder, or you're not worried about the next audit you're going to have because you're looking for help. And I understand we do specific safety plans for jobs. We didn't do any of that. We knew we did wear life vests. I mean, we had hard hats. I mean, I have the story. I had a hard hat on, and I had something hit me in the head one time. I'd be dead if I hadn't had my hard hat on. So we were using the safety personal protective devices, but I don't know that we were using them. We were using them mainly because we were required to use them, rather than how I hope that we've created the culture now. And I believe all of our employees, the culture has changed.
Yeah, safety is definitely a priority and a mindset. It's something that we think about and talk about with consistency because it does impact all of our actions and experiences, and also the actions and experiences of everybody working with us. Sam, something I'm really curious about. We've talked about all of the changes in technology equipment over the last 100 years, and certainly your 54 years. Are there any quote unquote old ways of doing things that you wish we could bring back and do it that way today?
A real short answer is a handshake. When I came, a lot of work was done with a handshake. I mean, there might be a paper that followed up the handshake, but you could count on a handshake. And something that really gets me is not only you can't do a handshake, but now it's a fist bump. So, that's a short. No, that's my answer. Really, the handshake is really what I was going to tell you. That is the only thing that I'd like to have back.
So when I hear you say that, it really makes me think of how much simpler things were then as compared to now, and maybe in some ways easier to get things done because you did not have to go through all of what we would call the quote unquote red tape, right? You came together, you had a discussion, you made an agreement, and then you went on and completed the task.
Krista, I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly right. And that's why the handshake was so good. And now the regulations and the cover your whatever, that's what it's all about now. So.
Which requires a lot of extra effort for everyone.
Exactly.
Well, Sam, let's talk about TA Loving Company, our beginning, and kind of a progression through our history. What were some of the standout projects in our history that you would like to talk about?
A lot of people know, in fact, I think most people know, that TA Loving, just in their first 15 years of business, in 1938 and 39, we built the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And that's where Martin Luther King did his march. But also that same period of time, We did all the work. We built Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty, which was an amazing project for a company that had been in business for 15 years. And I think that our 100-year history will show that we adhere to Martin Luther King's civil rights message. I believe that's obvious from if you look over the way we have operated. And I think we have also very much been for the U.S. and for our military. So I think those projects were, although we didn't get those projects for that reason, I think we line up with what those projects were built for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to tie that into what our company, what the values and how what our company's mission is, and those projects that were early on, how they really helped define what we are and who we are today. You know, when we look at all the projects we build, I look at them as quality of life projects that are essential. What's your perspective on all those projects that we've built and how it's impacted North Carolina?
Well, that's a good question. And I think that over the years, we, because of our financial stability and because of our diverse capabilities, we've been able to respond to the needs of North Carolina at different times. In the 1950s and 60s, cars had become, there had been more cars and more people. And so the state of North Carolina started eliminating the ferries over the bodies of water on the eastern part of our state. And T.A. Loving built 3-mile bridges in 3 or 4 different locations, which was a major project at that time. We built a 3-mile bridge over the Croatan Sound, over the Alligator River. And it's interesting that just this week it's been announced that the state of North Carolina is going to replace the bridge we built over the Alligator River. We finished it in like 1964, and it cost, I bet it didn't cost probably $2 million, and they're replacing it now. They just signed a contract for $450 million. So I guess we did a good job back in the 60s. But anyway, that's an example of what we were doing back then in the 50s and 60s. In the late 60s through the 80s, the population had increased. After the Second World War, of course, you had the baby boomers. And the baby boomers then had children that were coming of age for colleges in the 50s and the 60s, and plus the population was growing so much that hospitals in North Carolina had to be upgraded, and so we built county hospitals as far away as Gastonia, North Carolina, Union County, North Carolina, Horry County, South Carolina. We built in Raleigh, Durham, and all over the east around here, including Goldsboro. So T.A. Loving was available for those. At that same time then, the universities were expanding. So we were working at Duke, we were working at NC State, we were working at East Carolina. And then in the water and sewer, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, the federal government came up with a lot of money for county water systems, and we were available to really build water lines all over eastern North Carolina and all over North Carolina, and that got us into the sewer business in a larger scale too, and we built major projects for the city of Raleigh. So I think what I'm talking about is that our financial stability, our abilities to do all kinds of work, we have been at the right place at the right time, and we're in a state that we've been able to help North Carolina, and we're glad we're here.
Sam, you just talked about some of the diversity that we have in the business. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that started?
I'd be glad to, Krista. It really started before I came with the company. I think the building part of the company started as early as like 1933 or 1934 during the Depression, when T.A. Loving hired Raymond Bryan, who actually his family is a majority owner of the company now. But Mr. Bryan had been working for a building contractor in Goldsboro. So as far as I know, when he came to work for T.A. Loving, then that gave T.A. Loving the capability to do commercial building. Although T.A. Loving, I understand, he came down here and started this company when he was just 20 years old or so, but he'd been building houses in Culpeper, Virginia. So, and actually building some small other structures in Virginia. But that's how our building got started. In the 1958 or 60, they started a utility group, and part of that may have been because a nephew of John Loving's, a fellow named Bob Loving, came to work for T.A. Loving, and he and another person, I think, started off doing some utility work, and then that has grown to where it is today, which is more than half of the company, or at least half of the company.
Sam, you've given us a great overview of projects that T.A. Loving Company has worked on in the past 100 years. Can you tell us what projects you've worked on that you're most proud of?
Yes, I'd be glad to. In our bridge group, I'm real proud of a couple projects. So there were a lot of them, but I'll mention a couple. And I mentioned that we built a bridge across the Currituck Sound. Well, the bridge I talked about was built in 1963. Well, in 1993, the bridge we built originally now is the southbound lane of the road that comes from Norfolk, Virginia to the Outer Banks when you cross Currituck Sound. Well, we built the southbound lane in 63. Well, in 93, we were the low bidder on the northbound lane. And I was directly involved in that project quite a lot. And by the way, that project is 3 miles long and almost exactly like the bridge that they're going to build now. That's $450 million. And in 93, we did that job for $22 million. But that was, building a 3-mile bridge is quite an undertaking. And to build one beside one that you had built 30 years prior to it, I thought was pretty interesting. So that was one of the projects. And then another project that comes to my mind, T.A. Loving in the 50s, and this is a response to the North Carolina's needs, we started building, we started the port of Morehead City. We built the first couple berths of that port, and we built a couple of the first ones at Wilmington in the 50s and, well, the 1950s probably. In probably the 90s, I was directly involved with the last big project that was built in Wilmington was called Berth 9. And that was in response to the containers that you hear about today. Containers have not always been there. Most ship freight was moved as what they call bulk freight. But when North Carolina then wanted to start being competitive, and we built a 900-foot berth at Wilmington, and that has only gotten more efficient, and now they're renovating some of their old berths to make it more efficient that they can handle the containers also. In the building projects, I mentioned when the universities were growing, we were working at Carolina and Duke. At Carolina Chapel Hill, we had done a couple of cancer research centers. One of them's Lineberger and the other one's Bowles, I think. But anyway, they're high-end research facilities for cancer. we were working with Duke in probably the late or in the 90s, and Duke employed us to build a research lab. What's interesting about this, Duke built this building just because they had hired a really big name professor from up north somewhere, and they guaranteed him this research lab. And his study was in human genomes. So, and that was pretty much, I guess, when they were starting research on DNA. So we were right there at the start of some really high-profile things. We evolved then, a couple of the projects then, sports, because of universities growing and you got student bodies growing, sports became a big deal. And we did the Murphy Center at Carter Finley Stadium, which turned out to be a really high-profile job for us. That got us to do, actually, at Duke then, they had to have a football facility too, so we did the Yale Center over there. And then we did one at Greenville. But North Carolina, Chapel Hill, probably just 15 years ago, did what they called the Blue Zone, which is one end of their football stadium. It was an incredible job, and we did our usual great job, and somebody else recognized that. So we've been on North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill's A-list since that time, which that's what I always want. I want that reputation. I want repeat clients. In the utility work then, the projects that I remember, we built Raleigh's growth has driven T.A. Loving's growth. And in the 80s or 90s, we installed a 54-inch water line job in Raleigh that feeds the whole north side of Raleigh. It's a 5-mile job. And an interesting thing that I thought about it is I go up there every year to play at a member guest at Northridge Country Club, which is one of the best country clubs and golf courses in Raleigh. And our pipeline job came right up the 18th hole, right by the green and by the clubhouse and across Six Forks Road. So it was quite a project, and that, needless to say, was high profile, and it's still being used, and Raleigh's still growing. On the other side of the clean water, that was clean water. That's what you drink. And then the water that you don't drink, we have been constantly for the last 15 years doing big. The first job when I came here that I saw of the utility was a 54-inch sewer job that they were actually doing. I mentioned the evolution of equipment. They were using a crane that had a backhoe attachment attached to it, which you may not understand, but instead of the attachment being able to use hydraulics, it used cables. And that's a very slow process. But that's what you used back then to build that. And recently, we just finished a big job that I really think is a high-profile job for our company, was a big sewer lift station on that, going to that same plant that was 55 feet in the ground, and the lines coming into our pump station went 20 feet under the Neuse River, which these are just important jobs to North Carolina. They're important to our company. And then two more building jobs. Along with the research labs, we built in 1963, which I wasn't here, but we built the medical school at Chapel Hill. Well, about 3 years ago, we completed Roper Hall, which is a new medical education building, a medical school building. And we tore down the building we built in 1963 and built a new $100 million building on top of where we had torn the other one down. That's a pretty interesting story also. So another of our hospital jobs that out of the hospital work that we did, we developed a client with Pitt County. We did their main new hospital, And they have been a client ever since probably the 70s because they've continued to grow and change names. They were Pitt Memorial Hospital at that time. They became Vidant, and there's currently ECU Health. But we have done numerous projects, including a children's hospital for East Carolina, which is badly needed. It's the only children's hospital in eastern North Carolina. Very wonderful project. A project that meant a lot and has got us started. We built a heart center at ECU or for Vidant. And the thing that's important to T.A. Loving, when the hospital asked us about building this heart center, which was going to be a $100 million job, and it would have been the biggest job we'd ever done, they said, we want T.A. Loving to do this job, but we think you would do a better job if you had somebody to be joint venture with you. And so we were sort of married together, sort of by they instituted this thing, but we did it with a firm out of the Midwest that their architect had worked with. And even though we didn't know this other contractor, I knew them by name, and they're a national firm. The project was very, very successful. Well, that planted the seed for us in the future, which ever since that project, we're probably one of the leading contractors in North Carolina to use the joint venture delivery or contract process. And it's since that national contractor, we are doing our joint ventures with these relationship contractors that we know. And one of the first ones we dealt with was Barnhill, the company, the man that I told you that I met in 1972. And we continue. We're starting, talking about medical schools I just mentioned, we're starting the new medical school at East Carolina this month. It's called the Brody School. So, and we worked very hard to get that, and we're going to do that as a joint venture with Barnhill. But we've joint ventured with other contractors that we know across the state, people that I've gotten to know through the industry, Ty knows. And I think that those are the jobs that I remember. One more job, I keep thinking of more jobs. One more utility job as the Outer Banks, as it's known, which is Nag's Head and Kildelva Hills, grew. They didn't have a water supply. So we, in the 80s, we put a water line, we used barges. We put a 5,000-foot long water line under Roanoke Sound. Roanoke Sound's the body of water between Manteo and Nag's Head. And I was personally involved in that. I helped design the way we did it. But that was quite an accomplishment, too. And that water line is still being used because that area has grown so much. But those are just a few, and I know I've missed some, but that's probably more than you wanted to hear about.
No, I mean, I was sitting here listening to you thinking this is a really good snapshot. And the reality is that's what it is. It's a snapshot. There's so much more that's happened over the last 100 years. And even just the jobs that you've covered sound like a lot. So when you start thinking about it in totality, you understand the gravity of the impact we've had.
And we wouldn't have had that impact if we hadn't maintained our reputation and our financial stability. And we still have that. That's what I'm leaving Ty for the next 100 years.
I have an interesting question I'd like both of you to weigh in on. Ty, we'll start with you first. What's something about T.A. Loving Company that you think most people don't know, but they should know?
Probably my answer would be the diversity and all the different types of jobs we build. I think people are very familiar with us if they're involved with us on certain types of work, but they don't really understand the full range of projects that we build.
I agree. I think people have the experience. So whether they're working on a school or a medical center or an athletic center, they are very aware of the building business unit And if we're working on a wastewater treatment plant, they're very aware of civil infrastructure. And if we're talking about pipe, they're really aware of civil conveyance systems or pipeline utilities incorporated, and oftentimes lack the awareness of the other business units and the additional types of work that we do.
That's exactly the question or the answer I was going to do.
And while we're on your personal reflections, when you look back, where do you think TA Loving Company has been ahead of the curve in terms of innovations in the industry?
I've never really wanted to be out front with so far, but I think where we're in a league of our own is in giving back to the industry. And I think that shows up in the work that we've done through the associations. People all through our company have been involved in the association in safety and HR and in leadership. We've had 4 presidents of Carolina's AGC. Raymond Bryan was a president. I was a president. Jerry Smith was a president. And next week, Ty is going to be a president, or he may be right now. But that's a real commitment to giving back to the industry. I was also involved at the national level. Ty's been involved at the national level. But we have learned so much from other contractors, and I'm sure they've learned from us. And, you know, I'm proud of what we've done, and I'm happy to tell other people about it, but I want to know what other people, and anywhere that I can learn from something somebody else has done, that's why I don't feel like I need to be out front with so far. But I'm willing to give back to the industry, and I've promoted that with our people. And we allow our people to get involved as much as they want to. We've been very involved with the construction management program at East Carolina. I was the chair of that thing from the start for about 10 or 12 years. David's on their advisory committee now. And we're getting wonderful graduates from the construction management. So what you give, you always get back more than what you give. I've found that in everything that I do.
Yeah, Sam, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to talk about our company's industry involvement and the rich history that's there, and how much we've gotten out of being involved at whether it's Carolina's AGC or AGC of America or any of the other associations that we're a part of. But it is really something that's been instilled in me from early on in my career to get involved, and then now to see it where it is today and how we really promote that as a company. And I think it's so important for everyone to be involved like that. So it's a great part of our history, and it's part of our future too.
Well, Ty, I appreciate what you've done, and since you've been so active for the past years. So thank you.
Thank you. Sam, just shifting gears a little bit, what advice would you give to the younger generation joining the construction industry today?
Well, Ty, it's good that you asked me that question, because I'm going to take the words right out of your mouth. It's a great time to be in construction. It's a great industry. And, you know, by you saying that, you're telling people that you truly believe it. And the people, we've already talked about it today, the people are everything in our industry. I know other industries are driven by people, but the relationships of people in our industry are what make you successful. And that's what I would tell the people, that any student or person comes to me, you can achieve your life's goals in our industry. I would suggest, you know, having a positive attitude. And what I want all of our employees to do is I want them to enjoy their work. That's, I really believe you don't want to go through life doing something that you're not enjoying. And there's an opportunity everywhere for people, but I will guarantee them that if they're positive, they're enjoying what they're doing, and they make relationships, they'll go as far as they want to go in construction because the need is going to be there for construction. It's not going away. The technology cannot take away the need for construction. We've already talked about that. So it's a people business.
It is. Agreed.
Ty, how do you see TA Loving Company's history inspiring the next generation of leaders and workers, both within our company and within the industry overall?
TA Loving Company's first 100 years has been marked by resilience, progress, and unwavering dedication to our core values. As we look forward to the future, the company will continue to build on this legacy, driving forward with the same passion and commitment that has defined our past. Ultimately, this company is not just a builder of structures, it also builds communities, relationships, and most importantly, a builder of people that will be the next generation of leaders and workers that call TA Loving Company home.
We're here celebrating our first century and the fact that we've been a part of the construction industry for 100 years. What do you think has most contributed to our ability to endure and thrive?
I think I would mention the owners of the company. I think that's a key part of how successful we've been. The Hunter family, the Bryan family has always provided us with the opportunity to build the great projects that we build on a regular basis. The other thing I would mention are all the great people that have been a part of TA Loving Company's history and all the great people that are here today. The hard work, the commitment, the dedication that you see everywhere you go and throughout this company is just incredible. And that, to me, is what's been sustainable, and that's what's gotten us through difficult times, and that's what has been a main focus point for the success of this company.
It is admirable to see here how people really do enjoy being together and working together and are so supportive of each other. That's one thing that I've seen that really sets us apart is people's true interest in not necessarily being friends with everybody that they work with, but really supporting each other and wanting the best for each other and the overall outcome of the company.
Yeah, and I agree. It's a team. It's a family atmosphere, and I think that's just one thing that I've always loved about this company is that family atmosphere.
We recently did a survey of all of our employees as a part of open enrollment, and the word most used when they were asked, what is one word you think of when you think of TA Loving Company? The most used word was family.
That's great.
Sam, what does the TA Loving Company name mean to you personally?
The TA Loving name means everything to me. My father died when I was very young, and Ann's father, John Loving, pretty much was a father to me after we got married. And I've heard so much about TA Loving my whole life that I just hope that the TA Loving name is always here. It has survived these years, and quite frankly, that's why I have stayed as long as I have. And I feel very comfortable that name and that reputation is there. My wife's name is Loving. I have a daughter that has Loving in her name, and I hope there will be more uses of the Loving name.
Thank you, Sam. Ty, how about you? What does the TA Loving Company name mean to you?
That's a great question. I thought a lot about that and how to best think through that. TA Loving Company for me, that name means home. It's a refuge, a place of family, a place where a group of people have assembled for 100 years and are assembled today ready for the next century to build great things.
How do you see that reflected in the work we're doing now and the work you see us doing in the future?
I think, I know I mention it all the time, but everything we do is essential. It improves the quality of life the people that live in this region. And I think it's so critical to understand that we provide that to the millions of people that we influence with the jobs we build. And it really provides purpose for what we do. It is something that people count on, and we're there to provide it.
How do you, Ty, see TA Loving Company's role in shaping the communities that we serve?
I think we have such a great influence on all the communities in the area we work in. The great projects we build, whether it's a new school, a new hospital, a water system, a water plant, a new bridge, the impact we have on the folks that live in these communities is incredible. And I don't know that we think about it all the time in that light. And I think that's really important for us to make sure we focus on, is we are changing lives and we are impacting people on a daily basis.
Yes, you always use the phrase quality of life projects. And I think it's easy to look at a wastewater treatment plant and maybe not understand it or not understand the impact that it has, but it really is changing the quality of the water and people's experience in their communities, in their homes, to have that new wastewater treatment plant. And that's just one example of the quality of life projects that people experience based on our work in their communities and their homes in an ongoing basis.
Sam, if you could sum up TA Loving Company's legacy in one word, what would that word be?
Reputation.
Reputation.
Do you want to just define that for us?
No, one word.
I said you could get one word and describe it.
She asked the question and she can't stand it.
I am also terrible at one-word things, as we have previously discussed. One last question for each of you before we finish up our discussion today. What's one message or idea you hope listeners take away from this conversation about TA Loving Company's journey and impact?
Christa, what comes to my mind right off are, we talked a lot about our people. And I think, I hope that the listeners to this realize that our people are TA Loving Company and that the company values them, and we are only what they are, and we are very proud of our people.
Yeah, I would just agree 100% with what Sam said. Our success is based on our people. I think of this company, and the words that come to mind are steadfast and perseverance and words like that. We will see things through. We will always be there. We will complete projects. We will be there for our people to help them through their difficult times. We will be there to support them in their career, their goals, whatever they want to do. We want to help them with achieve those goals. And that's the way I look at the company. And I talk a lot about opportunity and providing opportunity, and it's for the people that work here.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really interesting and inspiring to hear not only your personal journey, but also to learn so much more about the history and experience of the company, both individually and also with the connection to the Eastern North Carolina as well as the U.S. overall.
Sam, I just want to reiterate what Christa said, and I was couple of things. The influence you've had on the industry is great. Your involvement in Carolina's AGC of America, and all of the things you've done there. But I would also couple that with the influence that you've had with everyone here at TA Loving Company. And as you remember, my first experience with TA Loving Company was interviewing with you in 1985, and that was my my entry into the industry and into this company. And I value everything you've done for me. I value your mentorship, and it's just been a wonderful experience for me. And I can't thank you enough. And you've done that with lots and lots of people, and you've had just a wonderful influence.
Christa and Ty, I really appreciate those kind words. I thought a lot before I came to talk to you, and it's sort of like it's brought back good memories to me. It's kind of like one of the things that's good about being in our industry. When you ride around, you might see a building or something that you built, and it brings back memories to you that, in my case, are always wonderful, and I can wear my wife out talking about that job or this job. So thank y'all for initiating those memories again, and let's look forward to our next 100 years.